The things I learned from a 93-year-old woman. You know, every so often you meet someone who completely stops you in your tracks. Not because they're famous or powerful, but because they carry a kind of peace you can't quite describe. This happened to me the day I met a 93-year-old woman in a little cafe. She was sharp, funny, and full of stories. The kind of person who makes you feel like time slows down just to listen. We only talked for an hour, but I walked away with lessons I've carried ever since. Lessons about saying yes, letting go, and remembering that growing older isn't something to fear, it's something to learn from. So pull up a chair, grab a cup of tea, and let me tell you about the things I learned from her. Welcome, come on in, get comfy, and let's sit for a while. She was 93, sharp as a tack, and had the kind of laugh that sounded like it had survived everything and still come out joyful. I met her by accident, one of those small, forgettable afternoons that somehow changes the course of your day. We ended up sitting beside each other at a little cafe. She had a cup of tea, black as midnight, and a scone she was very unimpressed with. "This used to be twice the size," she said, holding it up like a piece of evidence. I laughed, and that was it. We started talking. And you know how sometimes you meet someone and feel as though the universe just placed them in your path on purpose? That's what it felt like. Lesson 1. Don't make life feel smaller than it needs to be. She told me, "The trick, my dear, is to keep saying yes." Apparently her friends started saying no to everything once they hit a certain age. Too tired, too cold, too old, too risky. "But that's how your world shrinks," she said. "And once it gets small enough, you stop noticing the sun." That line hit me. We do that, don't we? Even when we're young. We start saying no, not because we can't, but because it's easier not to. No to invitations. No to trying new things. No to getting messy or vulnerable again. She told me she decided years ago that every time she wanted to say no out of fear, she'd at least consider saying yes. She'd gone zip-lining at 72, learned how to bake bread at 81, fell in love again at 88. She told me, "People think growing old means you stop having adventures, but it's the opposite really. You just stop pretending you have time to waste." Lesson 2. Vanity fades, grace stays. At one point, she caught her reflection in the cafe window and says, very matter-of-factly, "Oh well, I used to be gorgeous." Then she grinned at me. "But this face has been through a lot. I've earned every line." She told me how she used to spend hours worrying about her weight, her clothes, her wrinkles, until one day she realised no one was paying that much attention. "They're all too busy worrying about their own wrinkles," she said. And we both laughed, because isn't that the truth? She said she decided she didn't want to spend her last decades at war with her reflection. Peace looks better on everyone, she told me. I think about that a lot now. How much time we lose trying to fight the inevitable when we could be learning to love the person we're still becoming. Lesson 3. Don't hoard your love. This one came out of nowhere. We'd been chatting about the weather, as you do, and suddenly she said, "You know what I regret most? Not saying I love you more often." She told me she'd always been careful with her feelings, worried about being too much, or saying it first, or saying it wrong. But then one day she realised she'd outlived nearly everyone who'd made her hesitate. "I should have said it every time I felt it," she said. "To friends, to family, to men who didn't deserve it, but who made me laugh anyway. I should have said it because love doesn't last forever, but neither do we. There was no sadness in her voice, just clarity. The kind that comes when you've lived long enough to know the cost of holding back. And she was right. Love unsaid is like a song never sung. It just sits there, waiting until one day it's too late. It's funny, I went into that cafe thinking I'd grab a quiet cup of tea, and instead I walked out with a handful of lessons that changed the way I think about getting older. She didn't talk about success or careers or money. She talked about living, about saying yes, about kindness, about forgiveness, about laughter. The things that stay when everything else fades away. After an hour, I realised I hadn't touched my tea. It had gone stone cold, but I didn't care, because I knew I was sitting in the presence of someone who had lived. And she wasn't offering me advice from a pedestal. She was offering it like crumbs from her own journey. Here, she said, with her stories. Maybe this will help you find your way. Lesson 4. People are doing the best they can. She told me, the longer you live, the more you realise most people aren't bad. They're just tired, or scared, or hurt. She said understanding that changed everything for her. Her relationships, her patience, even the way she read the news. When you stop expecting everyone to get it right, she said, you stop being so angry all the time. She wasn't saying to let people walk all over you. She just meant that compassion is lighter to carry than bitterness. It made me think of how quick we are to judge people, and how peace, real peace, often begins the moment we start giving each other a little more grace. Lesson 5. Let life surprise you. At 93, she still got excited about Fridays. Not because she had big plans, but because she said something lovely might happen today. She told me the trick to staying young is to stay curious. Every day she tried to notice one beautiful, unexpected thing. A bird on the fence, a child's laughter, the smell of toast in the morning. She said, if you wake up looking for wonder, you'll usually find it. And then she smiled, that kind of smile that's half mischief, half wisdom, and said, besides, I still fancy the postman. He's 82 and still got all his own teeth. That was her in a nutshell, full of humour, but beneath it, something profound, that even in later chapters of life, joy still has a seat at the table. You just have to keep inviting it in. Lesson 6. Let yourself be cared for. This one caught me off guard. She said, I spent so long being the strong one, the organiser, the caretaker, the one who held it all together. Then she looked at me and said quietly, strength is lovely, but don't let it make you lonely. She told me how, after her husband passed, she refused help for years, didn't want to bother anyone, until one day her neighbour just started showing up with soup. And eventually she realised it wasn't weakness to accept kindness, it was connection. She said, we all take turns needing each other. That's what being human means. And I think about that every time someone offers to help me now, how letting them in is its own kind of gift. Lesson 7. Leave gentle footprints. When I asked her what she wanted people to remember about her, she said, oh, I don't need to be remembered. I just hope they felt better for having known me. That's it. No grand legacy, no name carved in stone, just kindness, the quiet kind that ripples out long after you're gone. She said, At my age, you realise that life isn't about how many people know you. It's about how many people felt safe with you. And I thought, isn't that what we all really want? To be a soft place for others to land? By the time we said goodbye, she'd finished her tea, ordered another scone, and insisted on paying for mine. I told her she didn't have to, and she said, "Oh, I know, dear, but I want to." And I let her, because I could already hear her lesson echoing in my mind. Let people take care of you. I walked out of that cafe lighter than I'd felt in months. Not because anything had changed, but because I had. I'd been reminded that life doesn't have to be perfect to be beautiful. That age doesn't make you irrelevant, it makes you radiant. And that maybe the real art of growing older is learning to keep your heart open, even when the world keeps changing. You know, I went into that cafe just wanting a quiet cup of tea, but I left with something so much better. A reminder that life, at any age, still has more to teach us. She told me age isn't a closing door, it's just another room. Quieter maybe, but still full of light. And I've carried that with me ever since. So here's to the ones who've lived long enough to know what matters, and kind enough to share it with the rest of us. Here's to saying yes more often, to forgiving sooner, to using the good dishes, and to leaving this world just a little softer than we found it. Because in the end, maybe the real measure of life isn't what we achieve, it's how deeply we've loved, and how freely we've shared the lessons we've learnt along the way. So if you ever find yourself next to someone older and willing to talk, ask them something. You never know what treasures you might walk away with. Thank you for sharing your time with me. Take gentle care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.